This is an essay by Harvey Lewis entitled, "What Makes for Peace?" Steel bars and isolation will assuage, temporarily at least, the propensities of the most vicious criminal. Confinement makes the antisocial person less a public menace and assures society a certain kind of security and peace. For centuries, civilization has considered imprisonment the only answer to crime and to the protection of its peace-loving populace. However, time has pointed out the fallacy of that theory. The problem of raising larger sums of money for much-needed prisons and the engaging of more peace officers has arisen to make uneasy the sense of peace. The percentage of crime has so increased that a goodly number of our populace in civilized lands is employed in detecting, prosecuting, and confining criminals, and every class of society feels the added taxation burden upon which crime imposes. Such peace and security, economists and private citizens alike agree, are too costly, the conclusion being that it is far more economical and effectual to strike at and eliminate the causes of crime than to house in prisons what crime spawns. Cannot this same remedy be intelligently applied to the promotion of international peace? In the broad sense of the word, the peace which the average individual desires is freedom from intervention. If nothing develops or occurs which will hinder us from realizing our personal ambitions, the world, our world at least, is a most peaceful one. Happiness is a relative term, evaluated differently by each individual. It is a state of mind for which each man or woman, consciously or unconsciously, is striving. An environment which does not interfere with the individual in gaining and maintaining his or her ideal of happiness is a peaceful and friendly one. Peace, then, is imperturbability, and we are perturbed when anything opposes our search for happiness as we conceive it. The nations of the world, just as individuals, also want peace, but like criminologists of old, they work upon the theory of preserving peace by the building of larger armed forces to imprison the disturbing nations. Huge armies and weapon caches are needed to intimidate peoples of any nations that step out of line, that display what is termed aggressiveness toward other states, or who in any way oppose them. Military isolation, or encirclement of a nation, is equivalent to imprisoning an individual. Heavy frontier enforcements, with large air forces poised ready to strike at the least sign of aggressiveness of a neighboring nation, correspond to having certain undesirable areas of a city heavily patrolled by police officers, armed and waiting for disorder. In both instances, the peace is an armed one, maintained by suppression of any rebellion against the established order. No attempt is made to remove the provocative cause of disorder. Most nations, regardless of propaganda to the contrary, do not enjoy ravishing other powers, small or large. The peoples of aggressive nations are not bloodthirsty, barbaric individuals, even though the results of their government's acts may have those earmarks. Incongruous as it may seem, they invite war, with its horrors of loss of life, property, and deformity, as a step toward an assurance of ultimate peace, a peace that means no interference with their livelihood and their happiness. As pointed out, no individual seeks peace if that means sacrifice of those things which to him or her mean the goodness and fullness of living. Likewise, a nation will not preserve the peace of the world while its own people starve, but a few miles distant from the billowing grain fields of a neighboring state. A people will not placidly sit by while their ships remain idle for lack of fuel, unable to transport their goods to foreign markets because another nation has a monopoly on the world's oil supply. A people will not inviolate international peace if their teeming millions are forced to huddle forever on an unfertile spot on the earth's surface. No people will endure starvation, pestilence, and isolation so that others may enjoy undisturbed their pursuit of happiness. Almost any man or woman would prefer death to this kind of slavery. Truly, a state of affairs which denies people what they need is slavery and oppression. Is there then no other alternative than war and the ravishing of the weaker by the stronger? The elements for a true and lasting peace among nations are found to be in the removal of those things which now incite war. There must be brought about an allocation and distribution of the world's resources and goods. This is not the suggestion that fantastic and illogical communistic theories or philosophies be adopted. What an individual has acquired through his or her own initiative, no matter how great it be, he or she is rightly entitled to, provided that it was obtained fairly and within the accepted laws of his or her nation. However, monopolies of natural resources and trade routes, in a time in the world's history when peoples and nations are so linked together that communications from one part of the world to another is but a matter of seconds, presents a situation much like that of a sumptuous banquet in the presence of a starving person. Education and science have done much to unite the races and countries of the world, and to preserve their peoples and greatly multiply them. It must now make accessible to all, under just arrangements, the raw materials of the world. If they do not, the have-not nations will take from the have nations, as do individuals, in accord with the necessity which follows from their own natures. This arrangement is not plucking from those who have and giving it to those who have not. It does not mean that scientific establishment of a method whereby the nations that have not can, through their efforts, the application of their initiative, and the use of their skill and vision, earn what they do not possess. It means that no nation shall prevent another from accomplishing this, just so it may selfishly preserve the balance of its own power and wealth. If there is to be inequity among nations, let it be because one is superior in achievement, and not because one nation can successfully oppress another. If the economic structure of the world is adjusted and people find happiness in their pursuits, peace will naturally follow. It will not need to be fired from a gun.